Hi, Beth. I hope you're doing well. This is for Journal D, my last journal. So the first question is, as of today, what are you most afraid of as you prepare for your first year of teaching? Definitely a couple of fears. Um, First, just having the supplies. Kind of nervous about getting like my classroom set up, even though I'm excited. Just thinking like, am I gonna have everything I need? And I know the school will help me out with that, but just like the little things. You see these classrooms that have so many resources and so many good ideas. So I just want to make sure my classroom is very similar to that. Also, just communicating and dealing with parents. I think as a student teacher, sometimes that's probably the biggest part we miss out on because these teachers have developed such great relationships with the parents. So we, even though we're part of parent teacher conferences, we're not the ones getting the texts or the emails from the parents. And so maybe just I'm nervous about my communication skills, even though I feel like I have good communication skills just with my kids' parents. I think that'll be a different perspective that I haven't seen yet, being the full teacher, being asked all the questions. Um, and then just like making sure I'm teaching correctly. Definitely my first couple observations will make me very nervous. My first year teaching, I know like it's a lot of hard work and you get observed a lot. So I think those constant observations will make me a little nervous too. But since spring break, uh, one of the most important lessons I've learned is how important it is to stay positive, especially in the area I teach. Um, Sometimes you don't really realize how positivity can affect your students, um, and I think sometimes you can miss that when you're going like day to day when like school is normal, and so it's super super important to stay positive in every interaction you have with your kid because it seems to really make the world of a difference. um, Also, just how important it is. My second thing is communication in all realms. So, whether that be with your co teacher, your students, your staff, um, it seems like the more people know, the more educated people feel, obviously, the better and smoother things run. So, just even being in meetings with the principal and like other staff members, it just seems like communication leads all of it. And if they don't have answers, there tends to be more people that are upset and we're angered. So that's definitely something I would say is just constant communication really just eases the mind. And then the third thing is just be ready to teach on the fly, be ready on the fly. If something doesn't go the way you think it will, have something back up ready to go. I've mentioned that a lot, but I just think having backups and being ready to teach on the fly or go with the flow is a super important lesson I've learned from online teaching. My thoughts about exposing teacher candidates to observing a virtual school or virtual classroom, I think it could be really important. I don't know if the COVID virus situation will ever happen again when we'll have to shut down schools, but it's always a possibility. I don't know if they should necessarily be asked to online teach, but making it an assignment or a journal entry next year. Like, here's some examples of teachers who have online taught. Why don't you watch these and reflect on them? What is different? How is it better? How is it worse? Just having them watch great examples of it and just kind of be prepared and know what it looks like if it's ever happening again. Um, and then, what do you do prepare for the next school year if it is online? Um, I would definitely say wherever I am, have a space that separates me from home and work. I know sometimes this year, because I didn't know it was happening, I was just kind of in my room all day because that's where my desk was and that's where I taught and that's where I did all my work. So I think it's going to be really important if this does happen again for me personally to have a space that I can separate my home life and my work life. Also, like a space that's engaging for students. It's not distracting. I would also say prepare ways to best know my students, but online. I can't imagine never having met my first class. That would be, oh my gosh, I can't even think about it, but definitely having and being prepared to really get to know my students, even though it might be difficult because I can't meet them in person. Um, but having ways, resources, questions, activities that I can really get to know my first class will be really important. But for a way that the KU School of Education could help is just communicating resources, techniques, strategies, connections, just trying to stay in the loop and get feedback from us as well as we get feedback from them. Just feeling like they're a resource and that they're there to help us. This experience and reflect on engagement. So I've loved online teaching. It really is. I mean, since we've had to, but I just feel so lucky that I get to see them and interact with them daily. It's been so fun, and I feel like I've gotten to know my kids honestly better by online teaching because it's so much less academic focused sometimes, and sometimes you just get to talk to them and see how they're feeling or how their day is. And they're more themselves when they're at home, that's for sure. Or some of my students are at least. But I feel like I'm prepared with a lot of resources and a lot of strategies that I was not prepared for before, especially engagement strategies. Holy moly, I feel like I've had to use so many, and a lot of the ones I've used online I can see applying to my real world classroom. So that's definitely something. Engagement, I feel like that's like, classroom management kind of lessons a little bit, even though that's really important when you're in person in school. And then knowing engagement styles and strategies kind of gets amped up more, because if you don't have that, it's kind of harder to keep your kids coming back, especially when it's not mandatory. So just all engagement strategies have definitely, I've become more aware of those and using them a lot. I would also just say the last part of that question was, what are you prepared to do better for your students to make sure they're engaged and ready to learn as well as reach the families? I would say just having a platform that works for all three. So me, my students, and my families. Google Classroom is what we use, and it's great for the teacher and the student in like assigning work, but I just feel like it doesn't connect the families really well. Seesaw I used last semester, and I loved Seesaw. I thought it was super user-friendly for all three, parent, teacher, student. I could really see myself using Seesaw in the future if that's something that my district offers. It's great at connecting parents and students, and I think once you get parents invested in what their students are doing and get them seeing what they're doing, I just think it engages everyone. And then for the last question, we know that there'll be gaps in learning due to continuous learning this spring. Be ready to meet students where they are and advance them. What are some resources you will use to make sure your students continue to learn and meet the standards? I would say, just like Topeka, they really emphasize conversation skills. That's definitely something I will also be emphasizing. I think it just makes the classroom time go so much smoother if they can use like, I agree, I disagree. It kind of gets everyone on the same page. Conversation skills will be really important in my classroom. And then reviewing and making sure each student is on the right pace, I could see being really important as well. Not everyone's going to be on the exact same page, but making sure if there's gaps in their learning, I'm addressing them, because there absolutely will be. And just like trying to identify them and kind of get them out of this like learning pit so we can all be back on the same page. So I think it's just going to be really important to stay like cognizant of where your students are at and where those gaps are. And then, just communicating those gaps too. Where do we feel lost? How do we feel about that lesson? Even like 1 to 5, how are we feeling about it? Just continuing to check in with them. Is this something that flew out of your brain and you don't remember? Or is this something that really comes to mind and we can move on to something else? Just like constant communication, because it's going to be a weird transition time. And then finally, just continuing to check that my standards align with my materials, seeing what standards possibly my students missed after this past year, and making sure that I'm hitting those really hard. Just constantly checking standards, making sure I'm aligning all my material, all my subjects, all of that with the standards to make sure all my students are on pace with everyone else around them. But yeah, that's it.